Okay, so we'll just start by settling into our place, quieting our mind a little bit, and we'll just take a few minutes to remember a few things. Number one, we are all on Indigenous country, so I would like to take this opportunity to recognise that we're all standing on First Nations lands and to recognise the elders past, present and future of those nations, and express my gratitude for their stewardship over the places where we live, work and practice Dharma. Secondly, I'd like to spend a minute or so just setting our intention for the day. So all kinds of ordinary intentions are fine, but the intention to free ourselves from suffering and to then free others from suffering is kind of like the best aspiration to have. So if that is not our intention as we start out, we'll just do a little bit of a shift so that that is our intention as we proceed. I'll just spend like a few seconds in silence so we can all set our intention. Okay. All right. So today we're talking about emptiness, which is a big thing. So I will take it slowly and give you opportunities to ask questions a little more often than normal. So in Buddhism, we have this idea of the four great seals. Those are the characteristics that an idea or a philosophy or a practice needs to have for it to be Buddhist. One of those seals is emptiness. So anything that does not recognize the importance of emptiness and work to revealing it, recognizing it, experiencing it directly, is not Dharma. It's just not Dharma. So it is core to the Buddha's teachings. It is what makes all of the practices work. If without emptiness, none of the practice works. So it's important on that very fundamental level in terms of three kind of spaces in which we move. So I'm using this sort of like language that we use in my particular school. There's other ways of talking about this. So in my particular school, we talk about the view, which is our philosophical outlook, the meditation, which is the practice, and then the conduct, which is the ethical practice, and also the way to apply the view and the meditation in daily life. So it's not just about ethical conduct, it's also about how to embed the view and our meditation practice into every moment. That is conduct. So I'll go through under those three kind of headings: view, I'm just jotting it down for myself, meditation, and conduct. Because I think that's a good way to approach this topic, which can be quite unwieldy. Because then we can see, okay, what are the philosophical ideas. And these philosophical ideas, unlike a lot of other ideas, they're based on observation of reality by an awakened being. They're not based on some schmuck making it up, just making notes, writing a story. The Buddhist view is reality. It's how it is. The interesting thing about reality is that we do not see it as it is. It's the fundamental problem that we have. So the view of Dharma, of Buddhism, particularly around emptiness, is what has been discovered through practice, through meditation, by enlightened beings, awakened beings, realized beings, whatever words you would like to use, starting with the Buddha. Now, the practices then, the meditation, that's about bringing the view to heart. So taking it from the head to the heart, where it becomes a felt or lived experience rather than just ideas. That's what the practice is. It's to bring that wisdom of awakened beings to heart so that we have a direct experience of it ourselves. And then the conduct is to do all that we need to do to ensure that can happen, and to ensure that until we're awake, we don't blunder around like a drunk elephant, harming others willy-nilly, because we have no idea what we're doing, what is good, what is beneficial. We have no idea until we're awakened. We have some sense of what ordinary ethics is, but we have no real sense of what you might call deep ethics, deep, compassionate action. Don't really know how to do that because we're tied up in who we are, which blocks the ability to act in that way. So my point is, these things are all deeply interrelated. It's not like they're separate. The view is the meditation. The meditation is the conduct. You know, they're all deeply interconnected. We divide them up in this way in order just to make things easier to understand. So I'll start just by giving a brief definition of emptiness, if I can. So the first thing I would say, it takes a very long time, a lot of reflection and meditation to really get emptiness. So we should not worry about it. It will come in time as we practice. There's no point sort of beating ourselves up or feeling like we need to strive earnestly to figure this out. We just keep reminding ourselves of the view, keep doing the practice, keep acting with kindness, and eventually it will awaken in our heart and we will know what emptiness is. The principal obstacle to really having a direct experience of emptiness is our own sense perception and our own brain, our dualistic mind. Those are obstacles to seeing reality as it is. I'll explain this in a little bit. So, I think I'm on record as saying I don't like the word emptiness. I think it's got lots of quite negative connotations in English, but it's the word that is most commonly used. But the Sanskrit word is Sunyata, spelled S-U-N-Y-A-T-A, Sunyata. The Buddha taught Sunyata early. So it appears in the early sutras. So the early sutras are those that are shared by all of the different forms of Buddhism, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana. So Zen, etc. Chan. So there's a set of sutras that are shared by all. Then there's a set of what we might call the Sanskrit or Mahayana sutras that are shared by the Mahayana, Vajrayana, Chan, and Zen. And then there's a set of tantras, which are only in Vajrayana. But the Buddha taught Sunyata in the early sutras. So it's there early. Then it really gets a very kind of like, it gets deep coverage in the Prajnaparamita Sutra, which is a Mahayana Sutra, so later. That being said, we don't need to know all that. So I'll just give you sort of a basic sense of what Sunyata is and then why it's important. So Sunyata essentially describes reality as it is rather than as we perceive it. So emptiness says Sunyata is the truth that no thing, so nothing, has an inherent, separate, abiding existence. Nothing has that. So Sunyata says all things, all of them, like there's no exceptions, exist in dependence on all other things, are interconnected, are impermanent, and are fluid rather than fixed. So in a state of change, flux, dynamism, rather than being solid and static. So the reason Sunyata is hard to grasp, beyond just intellectually grasping it, is because, the reason it's hard to bring to heart is because our sense perception tells us the opposite. Our eyes tell us that there are objects over there that are separate from us, that are solid, that seem to be abiding, that seem to be lasting. We actually need, although we intellectually know that things are impermanent, we don't feel the truth of it, otherwise we would not behave the way that we do. If we knew the truth of impermanence and emptiness or Sunyata, we would behave completely differently. We would not behave the way we behave. So that's a basic summary. We'll go into a little bit more about what Sunyata is. Now, the reason it's important is because, number one, when we understand this, it frees us from delusion. The delusion that things are separate, self-existing, have some inherent essence, are lasting, etc. We function in the world as though that was true. That is not true. And so when we understand emptiness, we're freed from that delusion and we begin to act differently. That's number one. Number two, because we've already said all things are empty. They are not lasting or abiding. They arise only in dependence on other things, multiple things, many things, and in fact all things. They are highly ephemeral, and they're constantly changing and fluid rather than fixed and solid. This applies to us as well. So on the level of our bodies, we can see that they're impermanent. We can see that they're always changing. We can see that they're not really separate from the world because we bring in oxygen, we bring in water, we bring in sunlight. There's a constant exchange going on. In fact, we're quite permeable beings. The idea that we're quite discrete and contained is a myth. We're quite permeable beings. We can absorb water through our skin as well as by swallowing it. We can absorb chemicals through our skin as well as by swallowing them. Like, we're quite permeable beings. We're completely impermanent, and we're in constant states of change. So that's a level of the body. We can see this. We intellectually know this, but we do not act as though that's true. We act as though we're going to live forever, and we're quite starkly separate from others. So just to labour this point about not being separate a bit more, you know, we have oxygen moving in and out, carbon dioxide in and out, water in and out, but we also, our minds, our emotions are essentially triggered by external things. Like, we have this idea that our thoughts are our own. In fact, in Western philosophy, they even say, I think, therefore I am. Big mistake. Big mistake. Our thoughts and feelings are triggered by external things, and that includes memories of external things. We cannot speak, hear, feel anything without external factors playing a very significant part. In fact, the major part in what we think and feel. So you can see on the level of the body, we're completely impermanent. There's no real inherent essence. It's permeable rather than discrete. So too the mind. It's not in this, our minds are not contained in our brains and isolated. Our minds are completely, the dualistic mind that is completely a function of connection with others and other things. So this is why it's important to get Sunyata, because we're trapped in this idea that we're separate, that our self, our sense of self is inherently existing, and that we are abiding or lasting. Because we believe those things, we believe in permanence, we believe in our separateness, we believe in our solidity or inherent essence or existence, we act as though those things were true and rob ourselves of living an actual awake life, a real life. Because we deny impermanence, we put off doing what should be done now to another time and may not get to ever do it. You know, so one of the main reasons people do not practice enough is because they don't accept or have not taken to heart impermanence, because they think, tomorrow I will meditate. Next year I'll go on retreat. That tomorrow might never come, and that next year is even less likely to come. So people put off, and then of course they don't get done. Even on the level of ordinary emotions, you have a spat with someone, and rather than letting it go, moving on, we hold on to it. We remember it all the time. We think about it, ruminate over it, and it destroys our life. Whereas the minute whatever happened that upset us is over, if we understood impermanence, we would be free of it, because it could not trigger any further thought, feeling, or reaction or action. It's gone. The past is gone. It's a figment of your imagination, in effect. It's gone. It no longer has any ability to make you think, feel, say, or do anything. We drag it with us into the present. And then, of course, we think, act, and feel in that moment based on what we've dragged forward with us, because we haven't accepted impermanence. We have these thoughts, we invest in them, we follow them, we get completely swept away in them because we think they're somehow worth our time, somehow valuable, somehow real, rather than just stuff triggered by external events, you know? Anyway, so the reason Sunyata is important is because I'm just repeating myself. We then can see the world for what it is, We can see ourselves for what we are, and we become unchained by the delusion of permanence, the delusion of separateness, the delusion of solidity, the delusion that we are our pasts. Those things are 99.9% of our trouble, of our woes. Once we're free of those, 99.9% of our troubles and woes are gone. And that's just by accepting Sunyata. Things are empty. And we can debate all we like the importance of our memories, the importance of our past experiences. But why? We have to ask ourselves, why? Why do we care? Why do we want to hold on to the past when it's gone? The answer is never a good answer. It's always a kind of painful answer, which is that we don't really know how to be free. Why do we not know how to be free? This: we have not taken emptiness to heart. We don't get it. We think things are solid and real, which means the things people say to us are solid and real. They mean something. They can affect us somehow. They can't. The things people say to us have no power over us at all. It's just noise, like a bird tweeting, like the wind blowing. We give it its power. We abdicate our own agency and we go, I'm going to believe what that person said and I'm going to act on it. You know, I'm going to be hurt by what that person said and I'm going to go into high dudgeon and I'm going to get them back, or whatever else we decide to do. Or I'm going to believe the praise that that person just gave me and think of myself as better than I thought I was before, or better than others, or whatever it is. This is all because we don't get that it's all empty. None of it has any substance. It's all echoes. It's all echoes. It has no actual power to make us think, feel, or do anything. Nothing out there can influence our mind in any way unless we let it, unless we kind of make a contract with it that, oh, we're going to believe in this and we're going to then act as though it's true, as though it's real and true. Anyway, so there are traditional ways to understand emptiness, understand Sunyata, and they are thinking about it in terms of every single thing has causes and conditions for its existence. So that's part of this whole thing we call dependent arising, which means nothing exists without dependence on multiple other things. So, but also its causes and conditions are vast and untrackable. A twig, the causes and conditions for the twig, you know, coming into existence are no less than the universe itself. It's like untrackable. It's so much goes into every little blade of grass, every little thing. The causes and conditions that bring it together are vast. It's like we can look at it in terms of, you know, if we think about a blade of grass, it needs sunshine, it needs rain, it needs soil, it needs, you know, the right temperature, but also it needs obviously oxygen, carbon dioxide. Also there's usually, you know, mineral nutrients it needs for the grass to exist. Then, you know, of course, it needs an atmosphere, therefore, it, you know, needs a planet, therefore, needs a solar system, therefore, it just goes on and on and on. So all we can see is a very small part of how this thing has causes and conditions to exist. But really it's vast. And those causes and conditions take out one of the major ones, no more grass. Take out a couple of even the minor ones, weak grass that won't grow so well, you know. It's fragile, you know, and it exists wholly independent on these other things. It doesn't exist separately. Nothing exists separately. So that's number one. We look at all things in terms of the causes and conditions that bring them together. And what does that break? That breaks the idea that they're separate, solid, inherently existing things. They just somehow exist by themselves. I mean, these days we know, because most of us have a reasonably good education, we understand, you know, earth science. We've all done a little bit of earth science in school. So we kind of understand this, but it's, it has a deep philosophical kind of impact when we really understand the vast number of causes and conditions that have come together to let just this one little thing be. It's kind of awe-inspiring. So number two, how we understand emptiness is we look at all things have parts. So no thing is just a single thing. Every single thing is made up of parts, which means what? It's not separately existing. Again, it's not, what's the word for it? It's not solid. It's a conglomerate, you know? It's not a single entity. It's multiple things creating the sense or the function of an entity. So we look at its parts. I'll give you guys an example in a minute, which is a fairly common one. And then number three is that everything has labels, which is how we understand it, which means essentially labels. What does labels mean? That's our language and our dualistic way of ascribing a name to that which we consider separate from ourselves. So everything has labels. And the labels usually around its function, what it does or what it means to us. So food is food. It's labeled that because it's beneficial to us. Poison is poison because it's not good for us. All of the labels are around this attachment and aversion that the self has to things that are separate, supposedly separate from itself. So to understand emptiness, we look at things in terms of those three characteristics or qualities: the causes and conditions, the parts, and the labels that we give it. And then usually what we do is we just pick something and analyze it and go, okay, so I usually use a tree because I usually look out the window and there's trees, but you can use a bicycle. So if you look at a bicycle, the label bicycle, it means that to give it meaning to us, and it means some, you know, a vehicle, a transportation device that has two wheels. You know, that's what that label means, bicycle. But a bicycle has many, many parts. Like I recently bought a tricycle, should use a tricycle as an example, an electric tricycle, and it came in like so many parts, like many, many, many parts, like from reasonably big parts like the tires to tiny little screws, you know, many, 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 many parts. That came in parts not constructed as a bike. So then it had to get constructed as a bike and then a trike, and then it's a trike, you know. It's not a trike until all those things are put together. Although, you know, like if you spread those components, those parts over the globe, at no point would anyone look at one of those components and go, oh, a trike. You know, it's just a screw. It's just a screw somewhere, screws sitting somewhere, or a little gadget or a bit of string or a bit of wire, you know. It's just, that's all it is outside of the context of I'm building a bike, you know. These components are going to come together to form a trike, a thing that I sit on and ride. So, and we do that in order to understand that it doesn't exist except for its parts and its label, and then, of course, its causes and conditions. So we want to just look at one part of the bike in terms of what comes to make it. So first off, you know, we have rubber that's formed into a tire by people in a factory somewhere. That factory takes power. So coal is burnt somewhere or electricity is harvested somehow to create the energy to make it in the first place. Labor goes into it. More than one person, no doubt, has made that tire. Then if you go deeper than that, the rubber comes from a tree in a plantation somewhere. That tree has to survive by getting air, water, nutrients from the soil, sunlight, the right temperature, needs the atmosphere of the planet, needs the solar system, needs the universe, you know, just to make the rubber for the tires. So, and then if we want to go deeper in terms of looking at parts, if you look at below what we see, so you look at the atomic level, then we've got atoms, neutrons, electrons, protons. And the further you go, the more separate these parts are and the more space there is. So one of the ways of sort of thinking about Sunyata or emptiness is to think of it as space enlivened with energy, or space with potential, you know. And the deeper you look at anything, you get down to atoms, protons, electrons, neutrons, small things. There's more and more space, less and less solidity. In fact, particles are also waves. So they're not at all stable, solid, fixed, and unmoving. They're moving at all times. And the subatomic particles that make up something are always being shared by that thing and entering into some other thing. You know what I mean? So there's an exchange going on at the subatomic level as well. The atoms and things enter and leave, you know, not necessarily at will, but there's a shedding. Someone did some study at some point that measured how many atoms were shed of a particular, I think it was a spoon or something. You know, so that like, we know that these particles are coming and going. They're not stable, they're not fixed there. So then when we look at it like that, we can see that nothing's really what our senses is telling us. Our senses are telling us there's a bicycle. We might pay attention to some of the parts, because if we ride a bicycle, we need to know some of the parts: chain, wheels, gears, brakes. You know, we might pay attention to some of those things. But there's a lot of parts there that we have no idea what they are. Little hidden screws, you know, little hidden thingamybobs. There were so many things in these boxes that came from my truck. It's shocking. I was like, really? All of this stuff just for my little truck? Anyway, so, and then, you know, then if we start thinking about at an atomic level or a subatomic level, it becomes even more partsy, even more less solid and fixed. So the other thing we do what we do is, to get this, is we do contemplations. So we sit and we think and reflect on an object. Choose something, doesn't really matter what it is. Think about the causes and conditions that have come together to make it. Think about all of its parts and how all of the stuff has to come together to make those parts, and have to go lower and lower. I've got some sound coming here from somewhere, though everyone's muted, so I'm not sure how that's happening. So it's just about learning not to wholly rely on our senses, our sense perception, because our sense perception tells us a different story. So we do these contemplations so that we have all of the information. I think like last time or some other time, I was talking about colour and how colour is created wholly in the brain by receptors in the eye that pick up wavelengths of light. Light has no colour. And then that's interpreted by the brain and assigned colours. And some people have like different senses in their eyes, so they see things slightly differently, like people who are colourblind, who are not really colourblind, they just see things differently. So, and of course, animals and insects, they have different receptors in their eyes, so their experience of colour is totally different. This is created by the brain. It's not actually there. Matter has no colour. Nothing in the universe has colour. It's all light. So our senses are constantly telling us a story that is not true. That the things we see are not separate from us. They're not separately existing. They're not permanent. They're not any of the things our senses are telling us that they are, actually. They're always, almost always, the exact opposite. They're impermanent. They're not separate. We're connected to them in many profound ways, interconnected. They only exist in dependence on many other things. They don't separately exist. So this is why we do the contemplations, so that we can actually see things as they are, experience reality as it is. And that frees us from the delusion, but does also this other wonderful thing. On a purely emotional level, right? If we understand the empty nature or the Sunyata of things, we're no longer bound by them. We're no longer contained by our sense of ourselves, which no matter how much you like yourself, and it's healthy to like yourself, that's healthy. No matter how much you like yourself, you've got no idea. We've got no idea what we really are. Our sense of ourself is always much less. We're these separate, small, emotional beings. That is not really what we are. We're that on the relative level, but on the ultimate level, we're vast, untrackable, uncontainable, boundless. So understanding Sunyata awakens us to that reality in terms of the things we experience, but also in terms of ourselves. We're not bound by any of the list of things, labels, that we apply to ourselves, like the gender label, the age label, the race label, the nationality label, the sexuality label, the education label, the job label, the parent or not parent label, child label. None of those labels can contain us, though we let them. You know what I mean? So once we understand Sunyata, none of those labels limit us anymore. And there's a profound freedom there when none of those labels limit you in any way, and you can use them if you want, as it might be useful to use them sometimes. Like people can get together based on certain labels and affect social change. That's good, obviously. And it's the label that helps them to get together. We're all this and we're not being treated well, so let's get together and advocate that everyone with that label is treated well. That's good. That's good reasons to use a label. But to limit oneself to think, I am only that, I'm just this, is a problem. And it also leads to lots of us and them type stuff. So to use labels to affect social change, to act ethically in the world, great. Use them in that way. But to use labels to determine I'm here and you're there, my experience is more valid than yours, my take on the world is unique. All the stuff we say about ourselves, because we're unique, special individuals, it's ultimately quite limiting, So interrogate our labels as well and what they mean, because all of these labels have meanings attached, and many of them are very limiting. There's some obvious ones, like you look at the label woman, the label man. There's some very limiting ideas circulating around those labels, and we know that those labels are not inherently real because they change. What they mean changes over time. In different cultures, it changes. So, the label man at the moment in this particular culture means, you have to wear pants, you have to have certain kinds of attitudes, emotional attitudes, you have to sort of have a kind of, emotional numbness, There's all this stuff that is accrued to that label that many people believe. We're all very enlightened sitting here, I'm sure. And we don't let labels, gender labels and role labels like mother, daughter, father, son, limit us. But many people do. Many people are very limited by those labels. Those labels are, among men in particular, the cause of many suicides, because people are not happy in the label. People feel quite oppressed in the label. People feel constricted in the label. you know, and it causes huge suffering, the buying into that label. So, you know, let it go. The label means nothing. We can make the label mean whatever we want. It's a label. We can literally change it. The other thing is things that have labels that are very negative, like pain. You know, when we feel pain, because there's a negative label, it hurts more. But if you can interrogate that sensation that we call pain, you know, and look at the label pain, maybe even take the label off the sensation and just have it as a raw experience, it's very different, you know. It's not that the sensation goes away, it's just that the emotional stuff, the emotional baggage accrued to that sensation because of the label, that goes away. And that can improve the situation vastly, like immensely. There's some research done in Houston, Texas by Bonpo. Bonpo is the indigenous religion of Tibet, by a Bonpo practitioner there. And they've shown that doing this kind of emptiness meditation on pain and their illnesses and stuff can lessen the pain by as much as like 30%. I think it might be 33, you know, but let's just say 30%. So it can dramatically decrease the kind of suffering that you're having around a thing because it has a certain label. Likewise, there's a lot of shame was this is probably past now. There was a lot of shame around pleasure, particularly sexual pleasure. So any kind of sensations that were pleasurable, people were taught, you know, it was shameful, and so they would shut that sensation down, you know, and feel dirty, ashamed of having had that sensation. So, you know, that's suffering because of a label attached to a sensation, which should not have any labels attached to it. When we understand emptiness, Sunyata, our experience is more direct. The labels aren't intervening in our experience. So pleasure's, you know, just pleasure. Pain is just pain. There's no emotional, cultural, religious baggage. It's just a raw experience. It's just what it is. And it makes it less sticky. I don't know how to say this, less triggering, less sticky. It doesn't produce a whole heap of other negative experiences or clingy, attached type of experiences. It's just what it is. So there's that. So Sunyata shows us, when we get it, not up here, down here, that we're not bound or contained or restricted by our experience, by the labels that we and others ascribe to us, attach to us, and that actually we're free. And also, our perception, without that intervening filter that applies the labels, that applies the misperception of solidity, permanence, separateness, when those filters are removed, when you actually understand Sunyata, like you directly experience Sunyata, then those things are no longer part of our perception. And so the universe becomes, I don't like using that word universe, but you know what I mean? Our experience becomes, I suppose, although that isn't quite right either, vast unity, dynamic light, luminosity, you know, all the good words, all the good words. Because the filter that makes things either attractive or you know, repulsive to us, those are gone. But also down the track, the sense of self, right, which we know all things, including the sense of self, have no inherent abiding existence. So that drops away. And then there just remains what we call, in Buddhism, there's many words for this. Rigpa in the Tibetan system. Bodhicitta also in the Vajrayana system. Buddha nature in the Mahayana tradition, right? Buddha himself called it the luminous nature of mind in the, I always mispronounce the sutra, Prubhasa Sutra. Again, one of the early ones. Luminous is the mind. Luminous is the nature of the mind. He's not talking about the dualistic mind, he's talking about that aspect of us that is not contained and limited by the self. So when you strip all that stuff, the sense of self away, and all of the thoughts, feelings, emotions, and reactions it has, there's just what we call an abiding non-dual awareness, which is not, okay. So when we think about Sunyata, or emptiness, we often think of it as a sort of a cold, detached thing somehow, but actually the direct experience of it is the opposite of that. It's an experience of connection, warmth, because once the ordinary self, the dualistic mind, drops away, the only expression that rises is compassion and kindness. That's it. And then there's unity, oneness, all these hippie words, all these 1970s words, that's the state of being at one with emptiness, with Sunyata. Not cold, not detached, not a vacuum, not nothing. It's vast potential because there's no limiting factors anymore. The labels limit. Our misperception limits us. Our perception of things as permanent, separate, and abiding or lasting and solid limits us. When that's gone, those limits are gone. When this idea of ourselves is gone, the self is like, separate, small, on a kind of a trajectory of past, present, and future. Once that's gone, we're not limited by that anymore. So it has profound impacts. So I've talked mainly about view. I might have a break now so you can ask questions about that. And then we'll talk about some simple meditations we can do to get there. I've kind of pretty much put lots of spoilers in there about how easy this is, but we'll do that in a minute. So we'll have a short break and then we'll do questions now and then we'll have a short break. So just pop your hands up if you have questions. No questions. Either because I've confused you all, or the hand button doesn't work, or you're all good. One of those things. All right, so we'll have a 10-minute break maybe, and then come back so you can visit your amenities. All right, so we'll be back at, according to my clock, 3:06. Okay, so we're back from our break. So I think I'll just wind up this discussion. So in the Vajrayana tradition, the realization of emptiness is what we call bodhicitta. So bodhicitta translates roughly as awakened mind. It's often mistranslated as compassion. And the reason for that is because a mind that recognizes emptiness is one that is fully infused with compassion, because those things arise in union. Realization of emptiness and boundless compassion arise in union. Which is why I was saying before, Sunyata is not a cold, distracted, detached thing. When beings realize emptiness, they also awaken the limitless, compassionate nature that's always been there. So our motivation for understanding this is, number one, to see reality as it really is. Number two, to free ourselves from limiting labels from the past, from misperception. Number 3, to awaken to our true ultimate potential, to give rise to boundless compassion. And then how do we do it is the question. So it's really pretty simple. We sit down, we choose an object to contemplate. We can choose a flower, a tree, anything you like, ourselves, anything you like. You go through it on those 3 levels. Causes and conditions. So you just contemplate what causes and conditions required this thing to come together. Then think about it in terms of its parts and investigate. Okay, so when we think of a tree, what's implied is this thing called treeness, or its essential nature. So try and find treeness. You look at its branches, at its trunk, at its roots, at its leaves. Where is treeness? Is it in the bark? Is it in the flesh of the tree? Is it in the sap? Is it deeper than that, in the cells? Is it in the atoms, protons, neutrons, etc.? Find it. See where you can find this treeness, this abiding essence of the tree. Where is it? Likewise, you can do that with yourself. Where is Pema-ness? Spoiler alert. There's no Pema here. There's no way to find it because it's not there. But you go through this, even though I've given you the spoiler, you go through it, see it for yourself. Can you find such a thing as a treeness or a bicycleness or a Pema-ness? See, can you find it? And you'll find that the repetitive doing of this is what brings it home. We always do this, as in everything in our lineage. We always do this contemplation on the cushion, even if that cushion's like on a park bench or sitting in the car, wherever. And then it's immediately followed by shamatha meditation. You do the contemplation, you go through the cause and conditions, the parts, and then the labels. The tree has many labels. It's got bark, trunk, boughs, leaves, roots. So many labels. Each thing has a label, but then each thing can be broken down again and again and again and again until you get to, protons, which are essentially light. So just keep looking. Where is this treeness? And then once you've got to the point where you're kind of like at space, because in between all of the protons, there's space. Is treeness there? And then you just rest in meditation. So you just go into meditation and just sit. And that creates a superhighway. Sometimes I like my silly metaphors. It creates a superhighway between the brain and the heart, the dualistic mind, and one's awareness, one's non-dual awareness. So it brings that there, although that understanding is already there. So it's more like it awakens that. But doing the shamatha awakens that at the heart. And then the principal problem that we have as sentient beings is that we forget, So we know things are impermanent, but from day to day we forget, and just look at how you react when you're walking down the street and someone shouts an obscene word at you out of the car window, which I'm sure has happened to all of us, happens to me often, and just look what the mind does. It reacts because it thinks somehow, the dualistic mind thinks somehow that there's some inherent being there separate from us who's done something harmful to us that we need to react to, and just also, you don't need to whack people yelling about car windows. This is a very Queensland metaphor. But just look at trees, grass and stuff and see how you react. You perceive them instantly as permanent and fixed without any pause, without any time. Instantly we sense them, perceive them and understand them to be permanent and fixed. So that's a problem. So we need to undo that by doing these contemplations, by bringing it down to our heart, and then we'll start to undermine that. And then in terms of conduct, so that's the meditation, right? We're given the view. The meditation is simple. You just interrogate things with these 3 components: causes and conditions, parts, labels. But also think about things in terms of impermanence, interconnectedness, and dynamism, flow, flux. And that will help. And then you sit in meditation. But then also in conduct, when we're going about our daily lives, when people yell at you through the car window, where you're walking along, try to remember impermanent. Whatever has been said, it's gone now. Upon hearing it, it's over. No need to react. Also, all kinds of causes and conditions are there around what they've yelled, none of which are true. So you don't need to feel hurt. You don't need to feel irritated. You certainly don't need to take revenge by chucking a stone at them. Interrogate, why am I reacting? It's because on some level, we're seeing this as not empty. What is that level? Do we think it's somehow true what they've said? Do we think it's permanently harmed us? What aspect of this experience causes us to want to react? And then likewise, we understand that there's huge potential, that we're not limited by those labels. We're not limited by the idea of things being sort of fixed and separate. So we can literally move in the world in a way that's more open, be more open to what's happening around us, be more flexible, be more kind. That's all part of understanding Sunyata. All right, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise, we can just wind up. Any questions? Jack, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks. That was completely awesome. I guess what I wanted to just mention is, it's like, you mentioned that there was 3 meditations, and for example, if you contemplate dependent arising, for instance, that leads you to emptiness and into interconnection and emptiness and impermanence kind of thing.
Yeah.
And what I was wondering was, so the first, because I thought you were talking about 3 specific sort of meditations, and I thought maybe it's good to try the different ones, to come at it from different angles, sort of thing, because some stuff's really sticky and hard to let go of and hard to identify as empty. Like, it's easy to forget that thoughts, judgments about people and stuff like that are empty, to forget for a little, or for some period of time anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. So is your statement that it's good to do just cause and conditions at one point and then look at parts at another point, and then like in a different day, and then look at labels another day? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was just sort of wondering about that, because I haven't done this practice. Well, I did once years ago go to a Tibetan Buddhist thing, and they were talking about doing this meditation on parts. And I didn't find it very compelling at the time, but I was very new then. But and so now hearing you talk about it go, oh, okay, yeah. I can see how you can pick things apart with that. And that's a specific thing, the parts thing, right? And then And then you were saying another one is labels, or no, what was the third one?
Yeah, labels.
Labels.
So generally speaking, you can do it in two or three different ways. So one way is to look at all three of those things: the causes and conditions, which is dependent arising,
Yeah.
the parts of the thing, and then
Yeah.
in analyzing the parts, it's important to go beyond what we can perceive with our
Right.
senses. And so think about like the subatomic level, waves as particles and that sort of stuff. And that really gets
Yes.
into the lack of solidity,
Yes.
space, the rich space in everything or around everything. Someone said to me, who was, oh, my beloved partner.
Yes.
Emptiness is the universe. So it's not like an idea.
No.
It's everything. So there's three ways of doing this. You can do those in that order: causes and conditions, parts, labels, right?
Yeah.
In that order. And that's the traditional way to do it. Or you can do it one at a time. So just look at causes and conditions, dependent arising.
Yes.
Then look at parts, then look at labels. Right?
Yes.
Or you can do a guerrilla kind of version, which is you work out what works for you.
Right. Right.
You apply it on the run as it works for you. And so there's no real way to sort of say this is the guerrilla version, because everyone's guerrilla version is different. But as an example, I know people who use the labels one to remove untangle the emotional suffering around chronic pain. So they use the labels one, and they just use it in that context, and they might use the parts one on something else, you know?
Yes. Okay.
But finding what works. So whatever works, do that. One thing, thoughts that's interesting. The reason why sometimes looking at thought in terms of its parts, right, might not seem particularly right. It's because we're missing some of the parts. So thought forms, you know, they have a beginning, middle, and an end.
Right.
Right. And if you take out any of those, that thought form's not there anymore.
Yes.
On a fundamental level. But then on another level, if you have, like, some people think verbally with words, they think in words, and some people think in images more.
Right.
They've got to translate into words when they speak. So depending which one you are, you look at, okay, each thought has these sentences and these words. It's very, like, you know.
Yeah. Habitual. Yes.
And also if you think visually, you think like each image you see, it has components, like there's a house, a tree, you know. So you think about those components, but then you think of, there's an external emotional, so it's got this foundation of time.
Yes.
Till an end, right?
Right.
Then it has some kind of external trigger, which may be the memory of an external trigger.
Right.
Then there's the brain working. There's the the scanders.
Yeah, right.
Sense perception, the senses,
right.
Then the perception that filters the information from the centers, then the cognitive process that applies meaning and labels. So think how all of that, it's actually quite intense how much is involved in thinking I'm hungry.
Yes.
Like quite a lot's going on. Because then also the tummy is involved, and then we might have beautiful potato bakes we've had in the past. You know, there's all this. So the reason why sometimes the thought one is, people usually the labels analysis is actually quite, because they can label the thought as either angry or emotion or sad or, you know, happy or whatever. They can it has these labels.
Yeah.
But if you look at it in terms of parts on that level of, like, quite complicated parts, and of course all of these are related. The causes create the parts, and then the parts form the parts. When they're together, we give a label based on the function. So, you know, bicycle is a bicycle because it has a function. A thought is a thought because it has a function. And if you take out the function, it doesn't deserve the label anymore. So labels like mother, if you take out procreation, not that I'm suggesting we stop procreating. People keep thinking that I want that, but I don't. If we take out that, then what's a mother? You know, then women who've adopted children would go, well, I'm a real mother. You know what I mean? So then is it caring then that makes that label meaningful? Is it, what is it that makes that label meaningful? So, you know, you can interrogate all of these things in terms of like the labels are about function. As function changes, the meaning of the label changes, and the way it constricts us or empowers us changes as well. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, yep. No, that's really good. Because I've been trying to think, I've been trying to approach this problem for a while because of, you know, my habitual sort of sticky thoughts about certain things that upset me or whatever that I go over, you know, like I suppose everyone does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, how to helpfully look at that. And yeah, the labels thing works like, oh, having a thought that, blah, blah. But that's also, it's kind of a bit too superficial sometimes, like because the thought that it's tied to you very deeply, a repetitive thought, you might have some deep hurt or something, right?
Yeah.
And so simply labeling, oh, it's just a thought, it doesn't cut through. I find it doesn't cut through.
You have to look at the triggers as part of its causes and conditions and its parts. So, for example, so if you have a repetitive thought, number one, we have to understand that these things are not intrinsic to our nature. And so we don't really need to worry about them so much.
Yeah, right.
Let them come and go. They will come and they'll go. And the less we worry about them, the less they return.
Right, yes.
Then think about it in terms of like its emotional, its trigger, it's part of its parts, its causes and conditions.
Right.
If its trigger is in the past, that trigger is no longer there.
Mm.
One of the tricky things, sticky things about thought forms and emotions, that the thing that triggered it originally is gone.
Yes.
The new trigger is our memory.
Yes.
Recalling it. And interestingly, although we may not have had any power over the original trigger, so for example, people can be scared of dogs because they got bitten by a dog, right?
Yes.
They do have power over the current trigger, which is the memory of the being bitten. That
right.
They can actually ignore it, adapt it, believe it or not. Every time you access a memory, it is adapted. So that's why every time we access a memory and we feel the same emotion that experience had at the beginning, it deepens and deepens and deepens the association between that memory and that emotion. But
yes.
we can change that up. So
yes, right.
Think about that differently, which is what exposure therapy is about, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So
right.
you change your emotional responses to memories. And then once that's happened, the repetitive nature of the thought goes away. You can actually turn something quite, there's I can't remember what the phrase is, but there's two kinds of there's two kinds of responses to trauma, right? One is to develop a traumatic syndrome, right? The other is to be transformed.
Yes.
And so there's a psychological term for this. I'm not a huge fan of giving these things these kinds of labels, but there is a psychological term for trauma that being transformed as a result of trauma, using the trauma to transform oneself. So
yes.
on this Buddhist idea that we can simply cut the past out and have a new relationship with that memory. We can rethink, because just thinking about all the causes and conditions and why that emotion itself is not, it's real but not true. You know what I mean? So
yes.
Difference that something's real, we have experienced it, but it's not true. and one of the big things about those emotions and those sticky thoughts that's not true is that they don't have to continue. We have this idea
Right.
that they'll continue until we do something, but you actually can just, I know this is an unpopular thing to say, but you can actually just ignore them.
Yes.
Like if you read the early sutras about what the Buddha said when he was asked, what do I do with intrusive thinking? Like,
yeah,
he was asked this question, and he said there are 3 ways to deal with intrusive thinking. Ignore it, number 1. Replace it with a positive thought, number 2, which is that's
yeah,
the kind of idea. Number 3, just tense your whole body up and then relax, so that you know the difference between being tense and being relaxed, and sort of block the thought out by doing that. So this is the Buddha saying this, you're saying ignore it or replace it with a positive one, or sort of get really, really tight in your body and then relax. So these are what he said. So there's no idea from the Buddha that we need to work through all those emotions.
right. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is this: when we're trying to bring emptiness, the truth of Sunyata, into our heart,
Yes.
it's not so that we can deal with our emotional stuff and or deal with our intrusive thinking. We do what the Buddha said: ignore it, think of something else, or just learn how to relax.
Right.
And this is actually a bigger question. In the process of doing this, all that will be unraveled, but this is actually about awakening.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah. Well, can I just mention something that I've used myself with that? Because I find like when I've got some really repetitive thought thing going on, it's really tapping into some kind of early trauma.
Yeah.
And so there's pain there. There's really pain there. And so what I've found has worked. It's just painful. Is actually just meditating with the pain, like you don't have to label it pain, but all the sensations that come up for it, and it really hurts, but just to let it sort of transform you, the actual feeling, like the emotion of it, and just fully embodying the emotion of it, and somehow that sort of transforms you, because you want to be transformed by things. You don't want to just kind of, you learn something. So you learn something in a way. And, I used to always meditate like that naturally, actually. It's just, have some thought, something or other, and then just sit with the feeling that it gave me.
Yeah.
And just sit in a very open and in a very humble sort of way, accept this emotional response that I'm having, and not say I shouldn't be having it. Just really feel it and let it transform me. But I found recently just some of my thoughts I've done so much meditation and they're just really driving me insane. And it's probably because I'm saying I shouldn't be having these thoughts or something, or these thoughts really suck or something like that. So I'm giving them energy.
Yeah.
So maybe it's better to do something superficial.
That's perfectly normal too. Like when you've got quite a bit of experience of meditation, the waterfall effect happens where, you're probably not having more intrusive thinking than you were before. You're probably having less, but because you're more aware of what's happening, it seems like a constant rush. And that's a solid sign of progress. So,
okay.
And the advice that people give when people say, "Oh, I'm just like dogged by these particular kinds of thoughts," it is to just relax.
Right.
To not worry, because it is a sign of being more aware, which is good.
Okay, good. That's a nice, simple approach. Thank you.
And back to what you said before about sitting with stuff that comes up. In Tibetan Buddhism, that's what we would call facing the emotion or the thought or the pain, looking into its face. It's a strange metaphor, but it's just to sort of, in a friendly, warm, open way, just to look and be with whatever is there, not suppress, not encourage, not label, just be with it. So that is also a very good strategy. And I think
Okay.
like my one proviso about that strategy is to try not to be careful what I say, because as soon as I say something,
Yeah.
you'll do it.
Right.
Okay, so just be really, as you said, just really open and humble, and this is a thing that's happening, and it will dissolve. Because as soon as one places one's awareness on anything, it will dissolve. The pain, fear, anger, as soon as one open-heartedly places one's awareness on it, which means to just be with it, just be aware of it.
Yeah.
It will dissolve. That is its nature. It just will. It's like a wave. It will peak and dissolve. And the more sitting meditation you do, the more effective that will be.
Right.
So
Yes.
to the point where very experienced meditators have this thing happening, which is called self-liberation of all thoughts and emotions.
Yes.
So they're already completely aware of it as it's just arising, and as soon as it arises, it just completely dissolves.
Yes. Right.
So
yes.
it's just like, yeah, but we don't try
Right.
to repress or anything, because it's all
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's all okay. It's okay. Yeah.
it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. And then you're starting to really embody the emptiness of things, I suppose, by doing that.
Yeah, because emptiness is both the absence of inherent existence of things, but also the potential for things to be. And that's the same
Right.
in mind. You know, nothing's inherently existing in there, but all this happens, you know. So
Yes.
it's a micro of the macro. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Sunyata is total open potentiality. Anything's possible.
Right.
Same with the mind. Anything can rise and will.
Yes.
And let it go. It will go naturally without any intervention.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same with memories and hurts and things like that. It's not that we should feel bad that we have them or that we should repress them or anything. We just look at them in an open-hearted way. But we do need to understand that the cause is gone, and
Right.
we've now become the cause.
Right.
Taking that agency is
Right.
really important, because until we
Right.
go, my dualistic mind has become the cause of this now, then we will never be free. And that person or that event that harmed us in the past
Right.
will revisit us every day.
Right.
So we're making a God out of some
Yes.
asshole that did something to us when we were children, you know,
Right.
and we don't want to make assholes gods.
Yes.
So by sort of like, just like what you're saying about just being with the thing,
Yeah.
understanding at some part of yourself that, and that's why doing these emptiness meditations separately as part of your practice, it'll feel, and when that stuff arises, you will just know it's empty,
Yes.
empty and impermanent, you know, and you won't have the reaction, and it will just dissolve.
Yeah. So in a sense, I know the wording I'm going to say might sound funny, but if those feelings are there, then we need to, from what I gather from what you've just said, in a sense, we have to take ownership of them or responsibility for them, like to understand that they're coming from us, because they're no longer tied to the past or anything. The past is gone. So they are coming from our own delusion or whatever, our own lack of complete enlightenment or whatever.
So let's be kind of careful, because it's no one's fault.
No, I don't mean ownership in the sense of fault. I just mean but the current version of the feeling is
or its origin is the self.
yes.
But the thing, so I would go one little step further and say that is the self.
Right. Yes.
Whatever all that stuff is, like all of the sort of memories and the past hurts and the current attachments and aversions, that is the self. It's nothing other than that.
Right.
But our true nature is much more than, it's not at all that.
Yes.
It's much more than that. So that shifting our focus away from our sense of self, which is none of it actually substantial or of any benefit really. We can harness it to benefit, but mostly we don't do that. And our actual ultimate nature is vast compassion.
Right.
And that while we think this is us, that is blocked.
Right. So that the sticky bundle of thought, feeling, painful thing that's there is the ego in a sense. And so experiencing that, if we can look at it in a useful way or practice with it in a useful way, it's actually directly pointing to where we're holding on. So to recognize it in that way, sort of thing.
That is what meditation is, to become familiar with that and how it works. Not to identify with that, but become familiar with how it works. That there are all these triggers and it's just very repetitive and boring. And
that we are identifying with it, and that's the issue.
Yeah, that is the goal. All right, we've actually gone a little over time, so I have to wind it up. Does anyone have a last question? No?
So just saying thank you. I have really got a lot out of all of it.
Thank you. So thank you for everybody, and Jack for that conversation. That was so much fun.
It was awesome. Thank you so much, Pema.
You're more than welcome. I'll talk to you everybody soon. Susan, let's chat tomorrow. All right, bye everyone.